Back to the Future Part Two is one of those rare sequels that some could say is of greater or even better than that first movie. I consider Back to the Future Part Two to be on the same level of the first movie. Maybe a tad bit better than the first movie, but definitely neck and neck with that first movie. I think Back to the Future Part Two. This is how you do a sequel the right way. The story to Back to the Future Part Two on paper can sound like a very convoluted and confusing mess, but when you actually watch the movie and if you put your faith in Bob Zemeckis and Bob Gale, the movie is really well constructed, and it does the best it can to flesh out the story that it's trying to tell, and it really does work as a middle part of the Back to the Future franchise. And I think that Part Two is maybe a tad more darker than the first movie, particularly when you get to the alternate version of 1985. But this movie, it has that same adventurous tone as the first movie. It has that same adventurous spirit of the first movie. The chemistry between Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd, it's as better than ever in this movie, just like it was in that first movie. And I like how this movie is divided into three different sections. The first half of this movie, we see Marty and Doc in the future of 2015. Of course, this movie depicts 2015 as being that generic future with flying cars and weird clothes and stuff like that. Though if you actually lived in the year 2015 in the real world, it's no different than how it was in the year 2010. To be honest with you, but I like the whole over-the-top look of the 2015 future in this movie. The aesthetic is just crazy and weird. Of course, one of the best gags in this movie is the Jaws 19 gag where the 3D shark scares Marty. It's great stuff. But the whole reason for Marty and Doc being in the future is pretty much Marty's family and Marty himself. He's pretty much a screw-up in the future. He has a really boring job. His kid's about to get into trouble, and Marty and Doc gotta try and prevent his kid from joining up with Griff, who is the grandson of Biff 10. And this is a very entertaining scene. That's a nice recreation of the chase scene in the first movie, 1955. Only we're seeing it in 2015, and it's a great scene with the hoverboard and stuff like that. It's really fun. It's over the top, and it's what you want in a Back to the Future movie. It's got that sense of just funness to it. And of course, after Marty, disposes of Griff and his gang, we get to stay in 2015 for a little longer. Now, in 2015, Marty buys this sparse almanac, and this almanac is going to play a very important part in this movie because it's old Biff who takes this almanac, goes back to 1955, gives it to his younger self, which causes the space-time continuum to develop an alternate reality. And the dark tone of this movie really does take place once you get to alternate 1985, and we see Biff, who takes the almanac and he uses it for his selfish, greedy means, and the reflection of 1985 is a reflection of Biff Tannen, who is this egotistical, just nasty person, and you're going to get a very nasty world. Hill Valley is become a desolate wasteland, to be in a matter of speaking. There's gun violence. You have Mr. Strickland going into street wars. You got Biff, who has turned the clock tower into a hotel, but Hill Valley itself has become a dump. Marty's brother and sister are all like scattered to the wind. George McFly is dead in this reality, and it's revealed that Biff was the one who shot and killed him. And the alternate reality of 1985 is this is where the movie takes a dark turn, and I like it a lot. And I would have liked to spend a little bit more time in 1985, particularly see what happened to his brother Dave. There's a deleted scene. I would have kept it in the movie. And I would have kept the deleted scene of Marty seeing the school because Strickland makes reference that the school burned down prior to the events of what happened in alternate 1985. I would have liked to have seen those scenes to further add to the desolateness of this alternate timeline. Now, eventually, Marty and Doc have to devise a plan where they got to go back to 1955 to get the almanac from young Biff, and this is where we get to see the first movie, only we get to see it from a different perspective, and I like this gimmick. The Avengers Endgame did it, but it was done better in Back to the Future Part 2. We get a chance to see the first movie from the other side of the lens. We get to see Marty. We get to see this Marty, Marty Prime, get to view the events of 1955 from a different perspective, and we actually get to see his reactions. We get to see Marty see his father stand up to Biff. It's a feel-good moment seeing that. We get to see him. We get to see him mingle a little bit more, and I like the scene, and I like it. I think it's well handled, really well directed. We get to see some other extra scenes. We get to see more scenes of Biff trying to taunt Lorraine. We get a very entertaining fight scene between Biff and Marty in the car, where once again Biff crashes the car into a manure truck. It's fun stuff. I like it a lot, but it's what happens after all this. So pretty much Marty and Doc, they got the almanac, they burn. Now they got to go back to 1985, but the DeLorean is struck by lightning and it sends Doc flying through time. And excuse me, it's revealed in a letter that Doc has went back to the Old West, perfectly setting up the third and final part of the BTTF trilogy. So, and this is what I mean, where I think that this movie is a good, middle half. It's a good middle because the characters get to have more expansion. Marty and Doc's relationship further gets to be developed more. Jennifer gets to tag along with the adventure, but Jennifer is kind of wasted in this movie because she doesn't really do much except just sleep. I mean, she's pretty much unconscious throughout this entire movie. She has maybe a couple of lines of dialogue. Now, Jennifer had to get recast by different actors because the original actress, Claudia Wells, did not appear in Back to the Future Part 2, so they had a different actress, and they pretty much recreated the end of Back to the Future Part 1, which was understandable because you have a new actress now, so you have to integrate her into the movie, and it's done fairly well. I like it. It doesn't hurt the movie at all. It is what it is. But from an acting standpoint, this movie is just as good as the original movie. From a cinematography standpoint, this movie looks fantastic. I love the look of the future. I love the look of the alternate 1985. The future has this very colorful pomp, has this bombastic look to it, while alternate 1985 has this horrific, desolate wasteland kind of look feel to it. And I like it. Dean Cunny did a fantastic job with this in the cinematography department. Robert Zemeckis, as always, fantastic director. This movie is visually, it looks great. The writing for this movie is strong. Is overall really, really strong, with the exception of maybe a couple of things that would have changed. Like I would have beefed up Jennifer's role a little more. I would have spent just a little bit more time in 1985. But that's just me and how I would do it. But overall, I think this movie is near perfection. I like it on par of the first movie. Though, now that I mentioned those two flaws, it's a step below the first movie for me. But in terms of quality, Back to the Future Part 2 is a great flick. Which is why I'm going to give it a very, very solid 9 out of 10. Back to the Future Part 2 is how you do a sequel the right way. It's a good continuation of the story, yet it stands on its own 2 feet, and it tells a really cool and very interesting story to itself, and perfectly sets up the final installment. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Back to the Future Part 2. Let me know yours in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.